If you can all take your seats, we're going to start our last panel. The theme of these panels today has been how an independent progressive movement uses the Obama moment. Modestly, I recommend to you an essay that Katrina vanden Heuvel and I wrote in the current issue of The Nation on progressives in the Obama moment, which tried to lay out our best thinking about it and start a discussion. Part of that discussion has been going on at ourfuture.org, our website, with now over 100 people having contributed to it. Part of it is going on at the nation.com website. We encourage people to get into this discussion about how progressives see us operating in this period. The point that Katrina and I wanted to make was two points, really. One was, I think there's a tendency, particularly on the left, for people to see the limits of the Obama politics rather than the promise of it or the potential of it. We've, over the last period of time, we've seen him change his position on wiretapping. We've seen him start to seem to wiggle on the war. We've seen him backtrack on trade accords. He brought in Jason Furman from the Hamilton Project, which raised the hackles of a whole bunch of us in terms of where his economic policy was running. And of course, the Republican Party's been running its message. This is the flip-flopper against the straight talk express, even as McCain has changed every position in the world over the last 4 years. So there's been a lot of disaffection among progressives, a lot of concern about Obama. And there is no question that we should not think of Obama as a movement progressive, the way that Ronald Reagan was a movement conservative. That's not who he is. But we are headed into an election with the largest ideological divide since that 1980 election. The choice between John McCain, who describes himself as a foot soldier in the Reagan Revolution, and says that he has, on all the big issues, this is his quote, on all the big issues, he has stood shoulder to shoulder with George Bush. And he says that accurately. And the choice of the different direction represented by the campaign on health care, on foreign policy, on economic policy, on energy, is a fundamental divide. And it's important for progressives to see that. I think even more importantly is to understand the energy that this campaign has unleashed and has mobilized. In 1960, when John Kennedy was elected, I was a kid. And he gave his inaugural address. I was in the Midwest, about a torch of freedom being passed to a new generation. And for me, it was like he was talking about me. The torch of freedom was being passed to our generation. And it excited me, and it turned my attention to politics. And the generation that he ushered into politics drove issues and campaigns and movements that went far beyond anything Kennedy ever imagined with his own politics. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, the environmental movement came out of that energy and transformed it and transcended it greatly. Where over the last months, there's no question that the Obama campaign and the Hillary Clinton campaign has mobilized a new generation and ushered them into politics. And that's true in the Latino community, it's true in the African American community, it's true among young people generally across lines of race. This is the largest generation, even bigger than the generation of the boomers, coming into politics, and the promise that's possible there as they bring their energy into this process and then their idealism drives them further is a promise that progressives have to see and have to understand and try to capture and try to help mold and try to unleash and continue. So there's no question, as each of the panels have said today, we need to build independent organization. We need to drive independent campaigns on issues. We need to continue that through the next 2 months and then beyond. And after the elections, we've got to organize independently to hold politicians accountable, both to remove the obstacles that are in the way of change and to hold accountable those who stand in the way of change. Joining us later today will be Donna Edwards, the congresswoman newly elected from the Maryland suburbs, who challenged a sitting Democrat who forgot where his votes were and voted instead with his donors. And she, running on an anti-war and a populist economic ticket, took him out in the Democratic Party. She is now the new congresswoman from that district, and she will be a progressive champion over the next period of time. We have to think of ourselves as being able to build the capacity to challenge those in both parties that stand in the race. So I recommend our article because Katrina contributed to it. It's much more articulate than I am. And I recommend and ask you to join the discussion on progressives in this moment. The first person I want to introduce in this panel, it's a real pleasure to introduce David Bonyer. David, for decades in the Congress, was known as a hero. He and I were both a little gray. We fought the Reagan wars against the war on Nicaragua, the covert wars that Reagan was unleashed against Central America when suddenly this little country of 2 million became the most important place in the world, according to Jeane Kirkpatrick, our UN ambassador. And David mobilized the Congress and the Democratic congressmen to do something that had never really been done before, to pass the Boland Amendment that made it illegal to continue to sponsor the Contras for overthrowing the government of Nicaragua. Reagan, of course, avoided that law and funded the thing through the White House, and that led to the Iran-Contra crisis that was, in a sense, the last years of the Reagan administration and the collapse of his administration. David has been a great populist in the Congress. He is now chairman of the American Rights to Work. And American Rights to Work, I think, is a crucial organization in this period, and its issue is a crucial organization. We will never have a broad progressive reform movement unless we have a strong labor movement. You can see that in this election. Obama has his hardest time translating to white working class people and convincing them that he cares about them, that he understands what's going on in their lives, that he gets them, and overcoming the barriers that someone who is an African American and a yuppie and a professional has in communicating to that community. And the labor union movement across this country, which has endorsed Obama, just had a huge rally 2 days ago with the head of Change to Win, the head of the AFL-CIO, the head of the National Education Association, all together talking about and charging up their own forces to go in district by district, union hall by union hall, and talk to their own members about why this election is so important and what the issues are at stake. There is no other body in the country that can do that. And at the heart of all of our reform movements has been a strong labor movement. David leads the organization that is mobilizing people to pass reforms that will help unions once again grow in this country. It's a pleasure to introduce David Bonyer.
Well, good afternoon, and it's good to see you all. And Bob, thank you for your kind introduction and for your leadership and for Roger's leadership with this fabulous organization that does so many wonderful things on behalf of progressive politics and engaging and getting people involved and thinking and tackling these major issues and problems that we have. It's always an honor and a joy to be with you. With me is Mary Beth Maxwell, who's our executive director and who's done an incredible job leading American Rights at Work. So she's going to be passing out a piece of literature for you, and it's very easy to look at. So if you see it, just glance at it briefly. It'll give you the message of what I'm going to speak to today. You know, there's an old Abbott and Costello routine where Bud Abbott says to Lou Costello, if you got 50 bucks in one pocket and 100 in the other pocket, what do you got? Costello says somebody else's pants. We have a big, big economic mess on our hands in the United States of America today. We have an enormous opportunity, similar to what Franklin Delano Roosevelt had back in 1932, to not only make change, but to make bold change, to make change that will reconstruct many of the broken pieces of the American economy and the American government. We have that within our grasp. And I think the United States of America is ready for that change today. Bob said in his introductory remarks that you can't have a progressive movement without a strong labor movement. And he is absolutely right. If there are any folks of American history or American labor history and progressive history in this room, I think you understand that already. I'll give you one example that highlights and underscores that. In the year 2004, John Kerry ran for president. There are 22 states in the Union that are so-called right-to-work states. We call them right-to-work-for-less states. They have very poor, lousy labor law. 22 states. Every one of those states voted for Gore and voted against Kerry. Flashback 4 years to 2000. Okay? Oh, every one of those states voted for Bush, not for Kerry. Flashback 4 years to the Bush-Gore race. 22 states, every one of them except Iowa voted for Bush again. Iowa, we barely won by 4,000 votes. So the point is very clear. Where you have a sense of union density, where you have good laws, you're going to get a better political result as a progressive. And the labor movement's going to be there for you not only on labor issues, but they're going to be there on a whole host of progressive issues, from civil liberties to civil rights to environmental issues. They're there. And they are, even though they've decreased in their density in this country, from when I was a kid growing up in Detroit, nationally at 35%, down to 12% today, 7% in the private sector. That's where we are. They're still at 12.5%, 13%. They still make up a quarter of the people that will be voting in this general election when you count union households. So they're a significant player. Significant player. What do they need? What do we need? What do workers need in order for this to become successful? Well, we need a new law, because the labor law in this country has been broken for decades and decades and decades. An example, did you know that every year between 20 and 30,000 people in this country are illegally fired or discriminated against in their workplace for trying to organize a union? 20 to 30,000. That's by the National Labor Relations Board's own figures and standards. Probably a lot more than that. It's an outrage. And what happens today if you try to go through an NLRB process is that you're going to get called in by your employer. You're going to have a one-on-one meeting with your supervisor. He or she is going to talk to you. They're going to give you the word. If you get involved in the organizing drive, you have a 30% chance of getting fired for doing so. If you and your patriots at work want to have a good election at the workplace and you ask for the election rolls, like I would ask for the election rolls running for Congress, you may or you may not get them. If you got them, you may have wrong addresses, wrong phone numbers, no phone numbers. You're threatened by the worker, the employer, by suggesting that if you vote for a union, we're out of here. 50% of the time they say we're going to move to another country, when only in essence 2% of the time do they actually do that. So there's all kinds of abuses. It's way out of whack. The American public today, when asked by Peter Hart in a poll, if you could join a union, would you do so? These are folks that don't belong. Over 60% said they would. And why do they say that? For very simple reasons. You get a voice at work. You get the protection of not one, but of the many. And that means you get to negotiate a contract so you can get better wages. If you're a union worker, you're going to get 30% on an average more than a non-union worker. You're going to get better health care benefits, 58% more of a chance to get good health care benefits. And you'll get a pension, 4 times more likely to get a pension. That's why people would want to join a union. But the people on the right, the National Association of Manufacturers, the Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of folks in this state who are running that kind of campaign in Colorado already, it's going to be on the ballot. They know that once folks actually have an opportunity to sit at a bargaining table to get their rights, they in fact are going to be on the downside, or it's not going to work out for them. When in reality, The best work environment is where the workers and the corporations, the workers and the agencies, the workers and the management, they work together. We at American Rights at Work, we put out a list every Labor Day. It's called Partnerships at Work, the Labor Day list. And we list the top 10 best places to work, where labor and management work together, and where there's good productivity, there's low turnover. It works for everybody. Harley-Davidson is one company. Kaiser Permanente is another company. I could go on and on and on. There are a lot of good examples of where this works here in the United States of America. And we've got to get rid of the bad actors. 75% of all organizing union drives in this country, what happens? What happens? They hire what we call union busters. These are law firms mostly. You go to Google, you type in union avoidance, you'll get a 500,000 hit. 500,000 hits on where you can go to get these union busters. So it's a big business. And they come in and they teach the management on how to keep a union from happening. What will the Employee Free Choice Act do? It shifts the field. It balances the teeter-totter. It gives workers the right to make their decision about whether or not they want to join a union. You get 50% of the people that sign a card and say, I want a union, like you get in 80 other countries. That's how they operate. Then you get a union. And that's what we need in this country. And in addition, you can get a first contract in a 90-day period, so that if you get a union and the corporations or the management says, well, we're just not going to sit down and bargain with you, nothing happens. This law says you've got to actually do something in a 90-day period. And it also, for the first time, puts some teeth and penalties into this act. It's important for everybody in this room who considers themselves a progressive to be behind this. You can do things to make a difference. We at American Rights at Work are doing a number of things that you may have seen already at this convention. If you came in from the airport, we put up a big billboard. We've got billboards that talk about how the middle class is falling and breaking apart. If you opened your newspaper today, the Denver Post, there's a big ad. America's middle class is falling apart. America needs the Employee Free Choice Act. And why we need it. We need it. You can applaud. Go ahead and applaud with that guy out there. He doesn't even work for us. Good for you. We need it because it helps working families improve their living standards, as I talked about it. We need it because the system is broke, because people are intimidated at their workplaces, and they're fired for trying to organize. And we also need it because it restores fairness and the promise of the American dream to Americans and American families across this country. So we've done that in the Post today, and you'll see something in USA tomorrow. We also are passing out materials like this throughout the convention. We have little hand and palm cards that are going out throughout. We have web ads that are up, and you will be seeing very shortly, particularly if you're in the 7 or 8 states, Colorado being one of them, that has close Senate races going on. You'll be seeing American Rights at Work coming up with ads on why people should be for the Employee Free Choice Act, defending people like Mark Udall and others who are fighting and struggling to represent working men and women in this country in the United States Senate today. So we've got a lot of different pieces going on. If you go to our website, www.americanrightsatwork.org, you can look at our materials. We're a research and advocacy organization, and we've got a lot of materials for you actually to look at. So we've got a great, great opportunity to get things done. And I'm very excited about the opportunity. This will be one of the first things that will be up in the next Congress. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be the first thing, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be one of the first things. It passed the last Congress with 240 votes. We got 52 votes to break a cloture, break a filibuster in the United States Senate. We need 60, so we got to pick up some Senate seats, right? So people who are from Maine and Mississippi and Colorado and a whole bunch of places, Maine, we want you out there working for your candidate. So they and you and we all can have a more democratic country, not only politically, but economically, and we can move forward together. By the way, did you know that in terms of enforcing labor law since 1935, this is how low we've come in the United States? We rank in the bottom 20 percentile. According to the United Nations ILO, that's the International Labor Organization, the UN arm, they rank all 190 countries. We're in the bottom 20 percentile. We're down there with Iran, Afghanistan, and China. So We got a lot of work to do. But I'll tell you something else, and I'm going to end with this. When we pass this act, and we will pass this act, when we pass this act, we will unleash a torrent of organizing all over this country like my father saw back in the 1930s and the 40s. Millions of workers will be coming together in a community, organizing, and we will see the rebirth of the middle class again, the bringing together of those broken pieces that I talked about. And when that happens, the progressive movement not only will be in the ascendancy, we will be on rockets, and we will be able to do all the wonderful things that we've all dreamed about but have eluded us for the past decades. Universal health care, a good energy program, a green energy program that revitalizes our country, good civil liberty laws, and an end to this rotten war that these monsters have created in Washington. Thank you so much.
We've talked about independent movement. We've talked about our independent agenda. The other piece of this is independent progressive capacity, building the infrastructure that allows us to communicate, to report, to comment, to exchange with one another. MoveOn.org is a classic example of that. I'm pleased to introduce an inventor of another classic example. She was named to the Time 100's list of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2006. She is the co-host of Left, Right, and Center, a popular political program. She's the author of 12 books, the most recent of which is called Right is Wrong: How the Lunatic Fringe Hijacked America, Shredded the Constitution, and Made Us All Safe. But most important, she is the inventor and the co-founder and the editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post has quickly become one of the most widely read and the most widely acknowledged sources of news, as well as commentary, in the political spectrum. I like to think of it as our web version of Fox News. That is, it looks at the news, it reports on news, but it also reports with a progressive commentary. It's a delight to introduce to you Arianna Huffington.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bob. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, David. I really want to start by saying that this is definitely a moment to celebrate as well as look forward because of how much has been achieved since 2004. So as we take this moment to celebrate in terms of building the infrastructure that Bob talked about, but also in terms of moving the country to the point where what used to be considered progressive, left-wing issues are now mainstream issues. Oh, okay. You can hear me without the mic? So we now have solid 60 to 70% majorities on issues like the need for some form of universal health care, on corporate responsibility, on bringing the troops home from Iraq, on global warming. I mean, even John McCain is trying to co-opt the need to do something about global warming. So this is a very new moment, and I don't think we have done enough to really define it so that the American people understand that we are all progressives now. And sure, you know, there is the right that I wrote about in my book, but this is like at the margin now. The people who don't believe in global warming, the people who think that staying in Iraq indefinitely is the best for the safety of this country, the people who think that all is well in Wall Street are really pretty marginal, right? So it's not like there is the right and the left, and that's why Bob and I have this discussion endlessly. I don't like talking about what's happening in terms of right versus left, because then psychologically, instinctively, people think that the place to be is the middle, because you don't want to be at the extremes. George Lakoff, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. But it's like, it's very important to look at how people respond to the debate. And if people know that being in the middle is somehow the right thing, because that's what they somehow have believed all along, ever since they were little kids, then they're going to end up thinking that the DLC, the third way, moderation is the way to go. So that's why I think it's terribly important to talk about redefining the new center, which is a solidly progressive center. Now, moving on to what I'm working on, which is the new media. We have a big job to do in terms of defining the new center and creating communities around the new center. And certainly the Huffington Post is working on that in multiple ways. One of the ways we're working on that is by not wanting to simply speak to the converted. We don't want just to speak to the people who are in the big tent. We want to speak to people outside the big tent. So as a result, you know, we are creating new sections all the time which are not political. Entertainment, media, business, living, style. And so we're bringing people to the Huffington Post who may not share our political views, or who may not even have any political views, but who then discover it in the course of coming to us because they want to read about Angelina Jolie, or they want to learn how to unplug and recharge, which is what the Oasis, I don't know if you've been there on the 3rd floor, is doing, which is really presented by the living section of the Huffington Post to show, demonstrate through yoga, massage, organic foods, that there is a way to live in life which is not filled with stress. And you know what? This has to be part of any healthcare debate. You know, we cannot have a healthcare debate that excludes prevention, that excludes lifestyle choices, that excludes people learning to lead their lives with less stress. I'm stunned by the amount of friends I have who cannot go to sleep without a sleeping tablet because they don't know how to disconnect from their lives. Now, that may say something about my friends, but it also says something about our culture. And I say that as somebody who is a complete culprit. You know, I am as workaholic as anybody. I had to learn not to let my BlackBerry recharge while I'm sleeping. I know it may seem small to you, but I don't want it in the same room because I may be tempted to go check it in the middle of the night. So I try to put it on the separate floor, ideally. But little steps like that, as we are learning how to unplug, which is a whole other debate, but it definitely has to be part of the healthcare debate. One more quick thing about that. Men have made a virility symbol out of lack of sleep. How many men don't you know who say to you, you know, I only need 4 hours sleep? I've had dinners with a lot of men like that. And in the middle of dinner, I feel like saying, but I don't say it. You know what? This dinner would have been much more interesting if you had had 5 hours sleep. So I'm digressing a little, but it's an important digression. So it's part of what we're doing at the Huffington Post is bringing in people from multiple other interests. And that way we're expanding the people who are also learning about politics with our own attitude and point of view. I have to say here that I don't agree at all that we're the Fox of the progressives, Bob. Because here's the thing with Fox. Fox is not about the truth. The Huffington Post is about the truth. And that is incredibly important. That means that even if the truth hurts our side, we are going to tell the truth. Because our highest responsibility is to the truth. And I feel this is a major point in terms of what the old media consider their job to be. Often the old media consider their job to be presenting all sides of a story without looking at where the truth lies. The truth is not found by splitting the difference between the two sides. The truth is very often clearly on one side or the other. How many debates haven't we had on global warming where this independent, neutral, objective journalist would be sitting in the middle with, let's say, Al Gore or the equivalent on one side, talking about the dangers of global warming, and Senator James Inhofe or Michael Crichton on the other side telling us that global warming is a fraud. And they consider their job to be very simply presenting both sides and, like Pontius Pilate, washing their hands off and saying, well, you make up your mind. No, that's not journalism to me. That is what is simply avoiding the essential mission of journalism, which is to search for the truth and to present it to the people when you find it. It is not objective, neutral journalism to have the author of the book on Obama that is filled with lies that has just come out and then have somebody opposing it. No, your job is to just clearly tell the American people where the truth lies when you know it and acknowledge it. And we don't always know where the truth lies, but we know where the truth lies much more often than you would discover if you only watched old media. So as a result now, at the Huffington Post, half of our traffic does not come from politics. And that's been our growth, and that's been our expansion. And just to give you one example, we trace where our traffic comes from. And one morning, a few months ago, there was this big increase in traffic. So if we looked at where it came from, and it came from Perez Hilton's site. Does anybody know Perez Hilton? Perez Hilton had linked to a blog by Ryan Reynolds. And this traffic had spiked dramatically. It also dramatically increased my street cred with my teenage daughters, who immediately said to me, very impressed, Mom, you won't believe that. Perez Hilton is linking to the Huffington Post. So what happened is that 72% of the people who came never came back. But 8% of the remaining came back and again became Huffington Post regulars. So just multiply that by hundreds of times, and that's been to a large extent responsible for our growth. And that also means that we are not just talking to progressives, which is something that, again, as Bob and I talk often, is a big job that we have to do, to open up our audience, to open up the people we are talking to. So let me just make one more point, and then, I don't know, are we doing questions, Bob? Yeah. So one more point has to do with John McCain. The final chapter of my book is basically about John McCain hijacked by the right. I call John McCain the Trojan horse of the right. And I'm Greek, so Trojan horses, I know, are big trouble, because people are fooled by Trojan horses. John McCain has basically surrendered on every major issue, whether it's tax cuts. Remember, he used to say that he could not in good conscience vote for the Bush tax cuts. Now he wants to make them permanent. On torture, he voted against the bill that would have made torture, waterboarding illegal. He basically, on issue after issue, including the agents of intolerance, has surrendered. He has sold his soul to the devil, if you want. He made this Faustian bargain. And it's working rather well for him, unfortunately, right now. And one of the reasons it's working rather well is because the media have not updated their image of John McCain. They continue considering him a maverick, an independent voice, and that's really one of the problems that we are facing and something that we need to relentlessly deal with. And relentlessly is the key word, because in our universe, which is at the moment filled with information and opinion, what matters is what is going to rise to the top, what's going to be what breaks through the static. And bloggers are obsessive-compulsive people. We stay with the story again and again and again. Often the mainstream media break stories, but they abandon them. Look at the military analyst, the Pentagon military analyst story, broken by the New York Times, but pursued by the blogosphere. So we need to relentlessly pursue the truth about John McCain until we can actually begin to see a change in the way the media and the American people see him. We have a big challenge ahead of us, but there is no question that the wind is on our back. We can blow it. We've blown it before, but we have more of an infrastructure and more independent media to really make a credible case again and again to the American people. Thank you. Should I sit down?
All right, we're waiting for Donna Edwards to come back from the Pepsi Center from the Stephanie Tubbs Jones Memorial to speak. While we wait, we'd love to take questions for David or Ariana or myself. Anyone? Questions? Comments? Quiet audience over here. We got a mic.
I got it.
Come
Here.
around.
Hi, I'm John Briscoe from Common Cause, and Ariana, you talked about converting the media to this new world where the truth is might be pursued. You got suggestions about how we might do that?
Well, first of all, by acting as media watchdogs, by holding the media's feet to the fire, the way, for example, we did not do in the lead up to the war. Remember, a lot of the criticism about how the media became enablers of the Bush administration in the lead up to the war, a lot of that criticism came after the fact. If the blogosphere, if the independent media were as mature as we are now, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more mature, we would have been able to challenge the media as the story is unfolding and challenge the way that they so often act as spokespeople for the administration. Not intentionally necessarily, but very often because they don't want to sacrifice their access. I mean, look at Bob Woodward. Bob Woodward is the poster child for what I'm talking about. You know, a brilliant investigative reporter in the Watergate years. He then basically sold his journalistic independence for access and book advances. Look at his first two books during the Bush administration were all enabling the administration's selling of the war. And then, of course, when the conventional wisdom shifted, he shifted. But he has not really been held accountable.
Ready? First of all, Ariana, it's exciting to see you in person. I'm so happy to see you. Anyway, that's just a comment. David, I have a question for you. My name is Charlie Lindahl. I'm from Houston, Texas. I'm a right to life state, and you said that every state that was right to life, the right to work went to Gore, and Texas definitely didn't. But anyway, my real question is, when it comes to unions, I am a programmer, I'm a computer scientist, I am a tech worker. I don't see any mention anywhere about doing unions for tech workers, new age, whatever you want to call that. Could you elaborate or talk about that, and why aren't we seeing anything for that?
I think you just
the question, for those who you may not have heard it, is the gentleman has not seen any indication that there is efforts being made to organize tech workers. And the fact of the matter is that there are unions that do just do that. And they're out there. The problem is it's very, very difficult under the existing law to organize, under the National Labor Relations Act. That act has been changed significantly since it was passed in 1935, in 1947 with Taft-Hartley, in 59 with Landry and Griffin, and all the board appointments and court appointments have weakened that law so that, you know, where it was marginally helpful to workers in 1935, now it's tipped so significantly that it's almost impossible to organize. So when we pass the Employee Free Choice Act and Barack Obama signs it, that will unleash an incredible amount of activity all over the country. It won't only be in the tech area. You know, it'll be in restaurants. That's why the Restaurant Association is built. It'll be in retail. It'll be in the Walmarts. It'll be all over this country. There'll be a huge breakout like there was back, as I said earlier, in 35 and 40. And it'll be an enormous, enormous uplift to progressive politics in this country and to those who we will have elected recently to the Congress and to the presidency.
Other questions? Here. Put up to George.
Hi, my name is Nick Bronson from California Common Cause. I have a question for Ms. Huffington. I couldn't help but notice when you mentioned about like just debate on the news in general and how the media tends to present every issue as viewpoint versus viewpoint and like a polarized clashing of talking points, which is endlessly annoying to me. But when I listen to a show on which that you participate a lot, such as Left, Right, and Center, is there any way that we can take a model like that and sort of elevate mainstream media's debate on these really important issues instead of having screaming person from the left versus screaming person on the right?
Well, part of what we are doing now, part of the new model, if you want, is creating alternative media. Instead of trying to change the existing media, creating alternative media. And it's already happening. It's already happening from the grassroots. I mean, look at YouTube. We just had a panel the Huffington Post organized, and Chad Hurley from YouTube was on the panel. And it's hard to believe that in February 2005 is when YouTube was launched. So in 2004, in the last presidential election, YouTube did not exist. So that shows how much has happened. And YouTube is not just sound bites. Barack Obama's speech on race, which is 37 minutes, has been watched over 4 million times in its entirety. So people are looking to YouTube, on YouTube, not just for sound bites, but for context. So, I mean, the other great thing on the panel was Will.i.am was on the panel. And he talked about the need for spreading the word, which is really the way new media works and the way we can spread ideas and spread policies and connect with each other.
Okay, do we have time for more questions, or are you trying to get us off here? Ariana's going to go downstairs if she has time and meet with the bloggers, as will David. Donna Edwards just sent a note saying that the tribute to Stephanie Tubbs-Jones hasn't even started yet at the Pepsi Center, so she's not going to make it. She will try to be here tomorrow on her own time and meet downstairs with people and sends her apologies. Thank you all very much. Understand this is a historic moment. This is an amazing opportunity before us to drive and change the debate and change the course of this country, and we can't fail it. Thank you all.
Good job.
Thanks, Chief. You're great.